Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human cognition. It's really good to be back. How are you doing? I'm really looking forward to getting into this one.
I'm doing great, thank you. And yeah, this is a big one. It's something we see playing out all over the world, this tension.
It really is. I think that's the perfect place to start with that central tension. We're seeing this profound disconnect globally, right, between age, experience, and, well, power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You hear about the traditional reverence for elders, especially in cultures, say, like in Turkey, where it's deeply embedded. Respect is just part of the culture.
Yeah.
But what's the reality today when you look a little closer?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our analysis really shows that societies they're caught between that genuine respect you mentioned and a kind of pragmatic dismissal.
So just for show, in a way.
Sometimes. You have to ask, is there respect really for wisdom, or is it a veneer, a tradition we keep up? Because the feeling you get, especially in tech and finance, these fast-moving sectors, is, well, it's thanks for your story, but we need to get on with our work now, so if you could just be quiet.
Right. And that really defines our mission for this conversation, doesn't it? To figure out the true vital function of an experienced person in today's world.
In this high-speed information age, exactly.
It all comes down to what kind of knowledge they should be sharing and what kind they're just not needed for anymore.
Precisely. And the tension, it's rooted in this information deluge we're all living in. The younger generation is swimming in it. And they often feel like they can just dismiss the past.
Like they can start from scratch.
Yeah, that's the dangerous part, this feeling that you can haggardly discover life from scratch.
Yeah.
Or, even worse, they're turning to large language models for wisdom.
Yeah.
They confuse the speed of information with, actual human experience.
And that confusion, that mistake of thinking data is the same as insight. That's the engine driving this whole disconnect we're seeing.
It is. It's the core of the problem, and it costs us so much. We've forgotten that knowledge exists on different planes. The role of an older, experienced person is not to give you information.
Okay.
I mean, information is learned quickly, it's specific, it's often obsolete in a few months. Our brains are built for that, for absorbing new facts. We don't need elders for data transfer. They're redundant for that.
So if data is redundant, what's left? What's the actual, the necessary currency of age then?
It's wisdom. It has to be. And wisdom it's contextual perspective, it's foresight, it's seeing the patterns.
It's not just the immediate effect.
Exactly. It's seeing the third, fourth, fifth order consequences of a decision. Wisdom is knowing how complex human systems break down, recognizing the old psychological triggers, understanding how things play out over decades, not just over the next financial quarter.
That distinction is so key. And we actually see it in practice, don't we? In, say, the university system, with the whole idea of emeritus's status.
It's the perfect model. A world-class university, when it keeps retired professors as emeritus, they're not bringing them back to teach the latest medical data or a new programming language.
Of course not. The younger faculty are better at that.
They're inherently better equipped for that rapid turnover of facts. The emeritus are brought back for the big picture, the meta-structure. How should the department be set up to survive the next 10 years? What are the little rituals of professional life that create real excellence? How do you handle a messy student conflict? That's what they're there for.
That's a beautiful example. The value is in advising on the system, the human relationships, not just giving out new facts.
And when that cultural link breaks, society pays a huge price in inefficiency. The transmission line is down. There's that powerful ancient idea.
I think I know the one you mean.
The elderly exists so the youth can know, and the youth exists so the elderly can act. When that breaks, the energy of the young is it's wasted on relearning basic human truths, trying to reinvent the wheel over and over.
So speaking of how we build things, what about the mind itself? If wisdom is built on experience, is our intelligence fixed? Or does living longer actually make you, smarter?
Well, biologically, there's no fixed limit to the mind's capacity. What we call AQ, which is, a broader concept than just IQ, it's more about integrated intelligence, is dynamic. It's the ability to connect things.
Connect disparate pieces of information.
Yes. So logically, the more you live, the more experience you have,
Yeah.
the more potential connections you can make. You have more wires available to cross-link and integrate.
That makes a lot of sense. More data points means more potential connections. But there's a huge caveat here, isn't there? This assumes a certain kind of life. Wisdom requires an open mind.
Absolutely. Experience is necessary, but it is not sufficient. If someone lives a really constrained life, a narrow life, say they only care about what 10 people or 10 sources say, whether that's political, religious, whatever,
Hmm.
then their cognitive output at 75 is going to be almost identical to what it was when they were 7.
Age 7. Why so specific?
Because at a certain point, they just stop integrating new, challenging ideas. They become a self-reinforcing echo chamber, so they can't offer broad wisdom. Their receivers are closed. They've lived 75 years, but they've only experienced the same year 75 times.
That is a sobering thought, especially now with our media bubbles.
Yeah.
But what about the opposite? The person who stays open, who travels, who tries to understand different people, who keeps their receivers on.
Those are the people. Those are the people whose work or whose advice can actually change the world in their later years. They have integrated the true dizzying complexity of being human. When they speak, it's not from a textbook. It's from a fully mapped out territory of human behavior.
So what's the advice for you, the listener, then? If you're lucky enough to meet one of these people,
Yeah.
what do you do?
You drop everything. Seriously, cancel your appointments. This isn't a conversation to squeeze in between emails. You make them comfortable, get them some tea or, something stronger if that's their style, and you listen.
Don't argue.
Don't argue. Absorb. This is a priceless opportunity for what we call a cultural injection. Decades of wisdom passed to you in a few hours. You don't waste that by trying to debate some trivial fact.
Which brings us back to this idea of a human imperative. You've argued that we've forgotten our core function, and that's what's leading to this crisis of meaning we see everywhere.
It is. Our primary duty, the one we always forget, is cultural transmission. We receive culture from those who came before us. We improve it a little bit, add a positive sada, a good trace, a good ripple, and then we pass it on. If you fail to do that, you've lived in vain. You become a stagnant pool, not part of the river.
And that connects directly to this modern affliction, especially among, say, wealthy but directionless young people. We see it in the fastest growing parts of the economy.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the tragic and very common example of high-earning software developers. They're making astronomical amounts of money very quickly, hundreds of thousands of dollars before they're 30.
And yet,
they have serious mental and physical health problems. Their lives are just sex, drugs, and sleeping. They've solved the resource problem perfectly, but they have zero meaning.
the crisis isn't how to get stuff, it's what do I do with it? They have the means, but no meaning, which is, the deepest kind of poverty.
Exactly. And the formula for meaning is so simple, but we overlook it. Use your resources, your time, your energy, your ideas, your money to benefit other people. When you only focus on I, your wealth, your big house, it becomes a prison, a tomb.
You're trapped by it.
You're trapped. A human is meant to be a vessel, taking things in and passing them on. When that stops, suffering begins. It doesn't matter what your bank balance is.
And the good news is, we don't need everyone to have this revelation at once. We can use natural laws, like the Pareto rule, to make a difference.
Indeed. Look at nature's 80-20 rule. If we can influence just 20% of a community to adopt this formula to become cultural transmitters, we can create 80% of the needed change. It's achievable. It just needs that critical 20% to build momentum.
Okay, let's shift to governance, because this is where the tension between young and old becomes, well, explosive. A system of government is basically a technical tool, right? Meant to manage society's well-being.
That's what it should be. And to work, it needs two components that are often in conflict. You need agile, fast decision makers. That's the role of the youth, reacting to new technology, new economic realities.
But you can't just have speed.
No, you also need a fixed, principled grounding. That's the domain of the wise elders. Some cultures call them the Axakalar, the Whitebeards. They're the anchor. They make sure core values remain no matter which way the political winds are blowing.
And the failure is always a failure to balance the two, when one side takes over completely.
That's when it breaks. When the old guard, the incumbents, determine everything and sideline the youth's energy, the system becomes rigid, it loses touch, and it collapses. But a world run only by the young would be pure chaos. No principles, no anchor. It's the wisdom that provides that stable ground.
This makes me think of voting patterns, which is always a difficult topic. We see a lot of analysis suggesting older populations vote more conservatively, maybe prioritizing their own comfort over long-term change.
We have to reframe that. The key is to understand the mechanism without passing moral judgment. People vote for their own perceived benefit. That's just a fact. If a politician promises them comfort, consumption, ease, to keep their big cars and their cheap gas, they'll vote for that.
Regardless of whether it's objectively true or good for the whole.
Exactly. So the issue isn't really the vote or the age of the voter, it's the underlying motivation. They are optimizing for personal ease, not for the collective good.
Which is really a reflection on where we are as a species, isn't it? Not just a political issue in one country.
That's the deepest critique, really. Humanity is right now like a less hairy chimpanzee. We're an immature organism. We're constantly trying these absurd methods, democracy, autocracy, technocracy, but we can't get it right because we're governed by ancient fears and the desire for selfish comfort. Our mental software is broken.
So what's the ideal state? How do we get beyond being chimpanzees?
The only real solution is a solid software update. For the human mind, we have to evolve mentally. We have to be able to think beyond our narrow identities, race, religion, nation, and prioritize the welfare of humanity as a whole. Only after that happens can we have a real debate about the best system of government.
Right. Until then.
Until then, we're just talking about the political adventures of slightly less hairy chimpanzees who will always, always vote for the biggest banana.
That's a powerful way to wrap this up. We've talked about the biological need for cultural transmission, the huge difference between information and wisdom, and the technical need to integrate youth and experience.
We have. Life is a transient vessel. Our purpose is to take what we're given, improve it, and pass it on. A world run by only the young is chaos. A world run by only the old is stagnation. The only way forward is to solve the technical problem of integrating them.
So as we close out, a final thought for you to take away. Given that your purpose is to be a cultural transmitter, and that the formula for meaning is simply to help others, what small, non-material thing can you do today? What positive ripple, what little sada can you start? That is the journey we all have to take to solve our own crisis of purpose. What's the one thing you can offer someone else this week?